भाई
Radhe Radhe, thank you Shyamji, and thank you Smita ji and Harishi for a wonderful session like always. Radhe Radhe everyone, a very warm welcome to today's edition of Daily Wisdom from Bhagavad Gita. Hope you had a wonderful day or having a great start to your day. Welcome. So let's get started. We've been talking about the concept of the how do we burn our karmas in this life itself. And today we will talk about what is the food for the soul. And also we will introduce, like we had promised yesterday, the different principles of surrender. And we will pick up that topic because it's a very, very fundamental topic. Um, each one of us would be interested in, very, very fundamental to our discussions, so many discussions that we have. So we will spend a good amount of time. We'll start with it today, and then over the next couple of sessions we'll talk about the concepts of grace, surrender, and take all the questions that you may have about these concepts. So let me share my screen and we will get started like I always do by invoking the blessings of God and Guru. Hope you're able to see my screen. We'll start with our opening words. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. All right, Radhe Radhe, morning, good evening to all of you once again. Let's get started. So we are on 4.37. I'm going to recite it and then you're welcome to follow along. Yathe dhansi samidhogni bhasmasat kuruterjana jnanagni sarvakarmani bhasmasat kurute tatha. Let's take a few minutes.
या संध्या राधे राधे
राधे राधे। यथैधांसि समिद्धोऽग्निर्भस्मसात् कुरुतेऽर्जुन ज्ञानाग्निः सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा.
Very nice, thank you.
दिनेश जी राधे राधे
Radhe Radhe. Dinesh.
Radhe Radhe. Yathe dansi samidogni भस्मसात् कुरुतेऽर्जुन नानाग्नि सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा. Radhe Radhe.
Radhe, thank you, Dinesh. Okay, we have a couple of more hands. Let's take those two.
सैम जी राधे राधे
राधे राधे। यथे दांसी समिद्रोघ्नी भस्मसात् कुरुते जना ज्ञानाग्नि सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा. राधे राधे।
Radhe Radhe, thank you.
राहुल भाई राधे राधे
Radhe Radhe, Rahul.
राहुल कैन यू हियर अस ओके विल टेक रिया जी राधे राधे
Yeah, Radhe Radhe Nitin and everyone.
Radhe Radhe.
Yataiधांसि समिद्धोऽग्निर् भस्मसात् कुरुतेऽर्जुन ज्ञानाग्निः सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा.
Very
Radhe
nice.
Radhe.
Radhe, thank you.
फाल्गुनी जी राधे राधे
Falguni ji, please go ahead.
Radhe Radhe, Radhe Radhe. Yathe dhansi samitopnir bhasmasat kuruterjuna jnani sarvakarmani bhasmasat kurute tatha. Radhe Radhe. Thank you.
You, Falguni ji. So let's get started. The shloka, Lord Krishna is saying, as a kindled fire reduces wood to ashes, O Arjun, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions from material activities. So we spoke about a spark, uh, can turn into a full-blown conflagration, and it can bring down an entire forest. And similarly, a spark can spark off a series of events, and it all starts with a spark, that spiritual spark that we get, and then we see the floodgates start opening. Today we're going to talk about the food for soul. So I'll set the context for that and then we'll get started. But let's start with our soul soup segment for the day. We've been talking about the different nuggets, practical nuggets that can be employed to achieve success, happiness, and fulfillment. Most importantly, fulfillment. So as part of this, we introduced what is success in life. Yesterday we spoke about it. Let's build on this. So yesterday we looked at the Oxford dictionary definition, the fame, power, money. We negated that. We looked at example. If that was the case, a lot of rich people would have been the happiest people on this earth. People who are famous should have been the happiest, but it doesn't work that way. There's something more to that. Now let's look at what some of the people or some of the great authors, they talk about it. So Mr. Deepak Chopra says success in life could be defined as the continued expansion of happiness and the progressive realization of worthy goals. That's his definition. Mr. Warren Buffett says, I measure success by how many people love me. It is contextual, as you can see. It's very subjective. Stephen Covey, who wrote that book of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he said, if you carefully consider what you want to be said of you in the funeral experience, you will find your definition of success. This is a very interesting definition. Right? One of the people, we don't get the opportunity or the benefit of reading our own obituary, but one of the people actually got it, and that transformed his life. That was Mr. Alfred Nobel. So his brother died, and next day he wakes up and reads a newspaper, and they thought this guy has died. And what was written in the headline of that newspaper? It was written that the dynamite man died. He said, is this the legacy that I want to be remembered for? Because he had invented dynamite, and which can cause a lot of destruction, we know that. And people, that was the legacy he thought would, and this is what world is going to remember me for. And then what he took a decision to change that at all, and he instituted the Nobel Peace Foundation. And even today we know the Nobel Peace Prize, it goes after that name, Alfred Nobel only. So, but he got to see his obituary, but we don't get that benefit. But that's a good activity. How do we want the world to remember us? So for some people, that would determine the success of their life. Churchill said success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And Richard Branson says the more you are actively and practically engaged, the more successful you will feel. So as we see that the definition of success could really vary, starting from Oxford Dictionary all the way up to different people, how they measure success. It's very contextual, very subjective. Is it truly subjective, or there we can bring in some objectivity about it? So the most beautiful and most comprehensive and the all-encompassing definition that I've seen is from Swamiji. Okay, and no wonder it is Swamiji, which we are going to build on. He says success is be good, do good, and feel good. Okay, very simple. Be good, do good, and feel good. Now that is a executive statement. What it translates to a little more deeper. Are we going to cover it today? No. For that, you'll have to stay tuned and we will discuss it tomorrow. What does it mean? Being good, doing good, and feeling good. And then how do we say when we do all these 3 things, that is the true success in life? It's a pretty profound definition, which we are going to build on tomorrow. So let's get started. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of suspense. for tomorrow's class, but we'll build on it tomorrow. So let's move on and get back to our Bhagavad Gita. So today we are going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? Yes, yesterday we spoke about karmas. So we have dimensions. There are multiple dimensions. One of the misconceptions about Sanatan Dharma or Hinduism is that people are fatalists. They leave everything to destiny. Okay, so this is something that needs to be corrected with proper understanding. Yes, there are people who may have an incorrect understanding around this concept, but with proper understanding, we can look at this concept on how much role our destiny plays in our life. So there is a prarabdha aspect of it, the drop of ocean that we spoke about yesterday, which is given to us in this life. Definitely, it has a play. So that is one dimension. Then you have another dimension, which is called kriyaman, something that you can do. You can exert your free will and do things. How did you get your prarabdha? By exercising your kriyaman in your previous life. Because you did it, it is your today's prarabdha. What you do today could be your future prarabdha. So this is how it works. If prarabdha exists, and that means you at some point in time you had an ability to do some work. So that kriyaman is what we do today, which could be our future prarabdha as well. So kriyaman, or the ability to exert our free will today, that is also a dimension or plays a key role in what we end up accomplishing in life and what we end up getting in life. So if you look at the prarabdha aspect of it, this is something we are born with. So that is the destiny aspect of it. How much percentage it controls our life? I don't know, 13% or 12% or 10%, but not a significant percent. Okay. Some things at a macro level are controlled by prarabdha, like the family that you are born in, the situation, circumstances that you are subjected to, and those kind of things. But it's a non-negotiable zone. You cannot change that. Right? You cannot. We have to bear it in our lives regardless. So that aspect is controlled with prarabdha. However, we don't lay a lot of emphasis or too much of importance to that, because prarabdha is prarabdha, right? It's like playing a game of cards. If you have gone to Vegas or anywhere, when you play cards, even with your friends, the hand that is dealt is fixed. But how we play with that hand is well within our control, right? So the deck of card that is dealt out to you is fixed. You can't do anything about it. But how you play is called kriyaman. So you could be dealt a very good hand, and you may end up playing badly and lose. On the other side, you may be dealt a very bad hand, but you play well and still win. So you cannot underestimate the power of kriyaman, or the purusharth, or the ability to exert our free will that God has given us. And this is where the kriyaman aspect that we're talking about is a negotiable zone. You have a choice every day, determined by our free will and hard work, future prarabdha, and what you end up achieving is somewhere in between. Okay. So result of our actions is not limited with our prarabdha alone. If we rely completely on prarabdha, that is being fatalist, and that is just not recommended. Definitely not by Lord Krishna. That will lead to inaction. Inaction is strongly condemned. People who go by fate alone, they are not doing themselves a great service. And of course, it is not something which is endorsed by Bhagavad Gita or Lord Krishna as well. Okay, so we should always focus on what is in our hands, what is it that we can do, and that is something that would make or break our current life. So these are the karmas. Because we spoke about the karmas, that's why I thought it's important to bring in this concept. You can always remember a game of cards. The hand that you are dealt with is bad, but you could still play well and win with it. Or the hand that is dealt to you, you can't do anything about it, but what you can do is play effectively and nicely with it. And that is what our devotee should focus on, rather than going to astrologers and thinking about, okay, how do my stars look? It's not going to take us very far. Okay. With that said, let's move on. Now, here is a parrot. You see the parrot is in a cage. Now let's suppose this parrot is in a cage, and the owner of this parrot tends to that cage very nicely, decorates it, shines it, takes care of it very nicely. Now, decorating and tending to the cage, will it satiate the parrot within? Is it truly helping the parrot? Parrot needs something more, right? You need to feed the parrot as well. If you keep on decorating the cage alone, it's not going to serve the purpose. Similarly, let's take another analogy. You take a fish out of water, you take it out of water and offer it a lot of jewels and precious stones. Would it do any good for it? If you think it would, I mean, it won't. Right? All it needs is to go back to water. Similarly, the parrot who's inside the cage, it needs something more. It needs food to survive. Decorating the cage, adorning the cage will not do much for it. Similarly, this analogy, if you look at it, this is our body, this is not us. So this is the cage in which the true parrot, soul, I, Atma, the real me is there. And if we simply keep on taking care of this bodily aspect, of course, we have to give it food to nourish it, because it is a vehicle given to us by God, a temporary rental, so to say, to progress forward in our spiritual journey. But if for our entire lifetime, we are focused only on this body and bodily associates and the logical extension of our body, which we call relatives and stuff, then we are just looking after the cage. We are not really catering to the soul as such. So that means soul also needs something to eat, something to subsist on. And our scriptures say that food for soul is the divine knowledge. When you get divine knowledge, your soul will say, something has clicked. Some aha it will experience. I'm sure you would have experienced that. Why? Because you are now giving it what it truly needs. We are part of Satchitanand. So when the knowledge aspect of it, knowledge is already there. We are simply removing the layers. But when you start giving it things, the soul, your inner self would testify that now I got something that I was craving for. And that's exactly what happens when people sit in devotion. Sometimes doing chantings and stuff like that, the tears start coming out automatically. Why do they come out? Because soul declares boldly that I have gotten the food that I was always looking for. And that testimony is so strong that you have no option but to acknowledge that. Okay, so that is the food for the soul. And same thing the divine knowledge does as well. So the knowledge that we are discussing, this is not a static knowledge, not written by a human being, which is capped with their their intellectual understanding. This is a divine knowledge. These are the words which came out of the mouth of Lord Krishna 5,000 years ago from God himself, who provided us a manual for living. And this knowledge, when you put trust in it, it's like conversing with Krishna himself, God himself. When you put trust in it and when you do it with faith, your soul will say, you're doing something good. It will declare. And you will feel that. Your experience will tell you. The proof is in the pudding. It's like the salt in food. You don't need a testimony. Just by tasting it, you know whether the salt is appropriate or not. So same thing happens with when you get exposure to divine knowledge, when you start contemplating upon it, when you start implementing it, the impact is so profound that your soul will say, yes, you know what, now I have gotten something that I was always craving for, which I never previously experienced or got. This is the power of spiritual knowledge or divine knowledge that we have. Now, if we have gotten exposure to it, we are extremely lucky, right? Not everybody gets that, because they are either not able to make it a priority, or they keep on postponing it, or they probably haven't hit that score as yet where their sanskars would dictate that this is something that you yearn for. It's not happened. But for people for whom it has happened, we should make the most of this opportunity, right? Feel extremely blessed, thank God, and keep progressing on that. So this is the food for soul. Now let's move on. Now, how much knowledge is needed basically for us to progress on this path? Knowledge is extremely important, right? Knowledge is important in the sense that a small piece of knowledge can change so many dynamics in your life. For example, if somebody, and even in yoga asanas, I've seen people who have been suffering from some backache or chronic backache, and they started doing bhujangasanas, a small piece of knowledge that did wonders or miracles for them. So let's understand it through a story that I heard. So now you must be wondering, what is Rolls-Royce doing here? Okay. Let me tell you a story now. Rolls-Royce is pretty royal, right? So there were two car companies who started vying for it, that we are going to acquire it. One was a Volkswagen, which is a German automaker. Volkswagen, actually, Volks stands for people and wagon is the car, so people's car. So they thought we are going to acquire Rolls-Royce, and they were pitted against BMW. Okay, so BMW said, no, we are going to take it. So they had a pretty stiff fight in trying to acquire Rolls-Royce until Volkswagen was able to pip them out. BMW, they pipped them out, and BMW was off it. Now what happens? Now the interesting thing that happens after this is, after Volkswagen acquires it, BMW actually threw in the towel. I think they got some information, because of that they were comfortable letting it go to Volkswagen. Now when they acquired it, they came to know that they cannot use Rolls-Royce brand or the name itself, because that belonged to Rolls-Royce Inc. That was a separate entity, and they could not. So although they acquired it, they could not use it. Maybe their lawyers and all, they did not do a good job. To make the matters interesting, this Rolls-Royce Inc. was actually owned by BMW. Okay, now BMW has the brand, Volkswagen has the car. What are you going to do when they can't use the brand, right? So brand is what truly sells in the market, right? They had built a reputation for that. And then it came, finally what happened was Volkswagen had to sell it back to BMW at a throwaway price. So that deal was a double whammy for them. First, they paid a high price, and secondly, they had to sell it out to BMW. And so that small piece of knowledge that they could not have, that made the whole difference in that deal. So similarly, even in our spiritual life, a small piece of knowledge is good enough for us to progress in life. We don't need tons of knowledge for us to progress spiritually. It's said that in order to kill ourselves, we need a pin. But if we have to slay somebody else, we need a sword. So in this particular case, we only have to benefit ourselves. A little bit of knowledge is important. However, for us to reach that stage, of course, we have to do a lot of stuff, right? And that is going to be a good segue to surrender concept as well. So there was another German company who had installed a very sophisticated machinery here in India, I think, in one of the factories, until one day that machine stopped working. So when it stopped working, they had to call this German company that, okay, we need help. And when they called him, they sent their consultant, the chief consultant, to fix the issue. So the bill that he charged, of course, the flight ticket and then $15,000 business class and food and meals and all the luxury along the way, his stay back here when he came here, all that was taken care of. It was a pretty hefty bill. And when he simply came here, and maybe one of the screws he fixed, 5-minute job, and he said, done. And they said, they cried foul. They said, that much stuff, just fixing that one screw, and you charged about $15,000+ for that. They said, what the fees that was charged for all the knowledge that he had on, which part of the machinery to look for, and within that part, which screw to look for, and then how to fix, might have taken 5 minutes. But to get that knowledge or to reach that point, that is where the whole remuneration would commensurate with, right? So similarly, the concept that we need to understand in order to progress spiritually is not very difficult. Okay, it's exactly the problem. It's very simple. But because of its simplicity, the faith does not come so easily, right? If somebody tells you all you have to do is love God, and that's all is needed, you'll say, so simple. You'll say, yeah, it's so simple. But then things which are simple, it's like, okay, no, if you tell somebody, no, if you have to realize God, you first have to walk 40 miles all the way up to a temple, that esoteric temple that nobody reaches, and then don't walk, crawl along the way. Okay, and then put ashes on your body along the way, and when you go there, hang upside down. Okay, and then don't eat anything, subsist on leaves, and that too leaves not by plucking, the ones which have fallen on the floor. Okay, and when you do it, when you reach there and you do it long enough, then God will be pleased. Then you'll say, yeah, this makes sense. So the point here is it's actually simple, but for us to reach that simplicity, we have to do a lot of intellectual gymnastics and convincing by going through a knowledge from different lenses, like Lord Krishna is explaining right now. And finally, we just have to reach a stage of loving God. Radhe Govind, Govind Radhe. If you do that with faith, conviction, love, nothing else is needed actually. Okay. But for us to reach that stage, it of course, it takes a lot of convincing, a lot of understanding, a lot of knowledge, which has to sink deep, and then it will make sense. So knowledge, truly not too much is needed for us to progress, but then whichever part of knowledge you resonate with, just latch on to that and center your life around it and see how transformative it could be. Okay. And the good thing with knowledge about this divine knowledge is that if you start implementing one piece of knowledge, a small piece of knowledge, from Bhagavad Gita, the rest all will follow as well. So it's not possible that you start progressing in one aspect and the other aspects will get neglected. So this is the beauty of this knowledge. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about surrender. I promise that we are going to introduce this concept today. Yes, Shyamji, you had a question?
Yeah, just bhai. Please again explain how do you correlate salt with knowledge? The analogy of salt with
Knowledge?
knowledge.
Okay, salt is very interesting. Okay, it does a couple of things. Salt is the ingredient which is most nishkam. Has anybody appreciated salt in food? Nobody does, right? But without salt, nothing would taste well. So salt is a nishkam sevak. Okay, nishkam ingredient, I would say. But anyways, I'm going a little tangent there because you asked about salt. Salt in knowledge, when I said that, it is like it is self-evident in the sense that you don't need a proof for that, right? For example, if salt is more or less, just by tasting you would know it, right? So it's like the proof is in the pudding. So similarly, the knowledge, once we start implementing it, the proof is in the pudding. What you realize, what you experience, what how you benefit from it, that is a matter of your experience. So it's like that experience, right? How can you explain few things like how salty it is? Can you explain that, how salty it is? It's a matter of experience. You'll say it is too salty. Too means what? This much, this much, this much. You can't. So similarly with knowledge, when it becomes realization, your experience would tell you that, yeah, something good is happening. So it's more of an experiential thing. That is where I was equating it. That makes sense? Or did I confuse you more?
No, this is Pooja ji, I hope you're there.
Sorry?
This was by Pooja ji asked this question.
Okay.
So I'm sure
You can give
she
me
is
a
okay
thumbs up
with
or thumbs
answering.
down to tell me
Pooja
whether
ji,
it makes
are you
sense or
okay
not.
with this? She is okay with it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Bye.
see, policy is very simple. If you can't convince them, confuse them.
Confused
Okay,
them.
they give thumbs up.
Thank
Okay,
you so much. Yeah.
all right. So, talking about surrender, just to set a context for it, surrender is a state. Okay, surrender is not an act; it's a way of living. It's not a garland that you make somebody wear and say, "I'm surrendered." Or, surrender is done from a position of strength, not from a position of weakness. Right? For example, if somebody comes and puts a gun to your head and say, "Hands up," say, "I'm surrendered." That is also surrender, but that's a forced surrender. In this case, we are going to talk about surrender as a way of life and what are those principles. What happens when we surrender? When we surrender, God takes control completely, because you are declared to God that I only acknowledge my relationship with you and no nothing else. I'm only dependent on you and nobody else. I only believe you are mine and nobody else. Okay, so you have already declared all of that. I only love you and nobody else. Okay, that might sound a little revolutionary, but so that is a state of mind. And when you do that, what does God do? He takes complete control of your life. It's like a mother takes a control of a little kid. Does kid have to do anything? Kid doesn't have to do anything. It will simply cry and mom will do everything, running around, feeding the baby, washing it up and everything. So same thing God says, when you surrender, I'll take complete control of your life. Now, what are those principles of surrender? Before I get started with that, I'll tell you a quick story. From our scriptures, Mahabharata, we've all heard about that episode that happened with Draupadi, right? So that is a good example in the what is surrender actually. So we know when she was brought to the courthouse by Dushasan, um, it did not make up for a good scene, right? So then she resisted. She could not resist because Dushasan was very, very strong. He had the bal or the power of 100 elephants, thousands of elephants. So she could not do much. Anyway, when he started with that activity of disrobing her, what does Draupadi do? Let's look at the sequence of the events that unfold to understand how what is meant by surrender. Did she surrender to God? She did not. What did she do first? She looked at her husbands, right? She has, the best archer as her husband, the best mace wielder, Bhim, then best archer, Arjun, Dharamraj, Yudhishthir, Nakul, Sahadev, all were like, they were like numero uno in their particular arts. So she looked at them one by one that they are going to save me. Okay. They hung their head down that, sorry, we cannot do anything. So that's the first ashray. Like we have, when something bad happens to us, whom do we go to? We go to people around. My friends, my family, they'll take care of me, right? That is the de facto setting in our brain. That somebody in my family or somebody is going to take care of me. Draupadi did the same. Nothing happened. After that, what happens? Does she surrender? She does not. Then she looks around in the courtroom. She looks at all the elders, Bhishma Pitama, Kripacharya, Dhritarashtra, everyone, and they also hung their head that sorry, we can't do anything about it. Same thing happens with us as well. We look at more relatives, elders in our family for guidance and stuff like that. That they are the ones, they will do something, they wield some magic, and things will be set right. Nothing happened. After that, what happens? Does she surrender? She does not. Then she was one of the Panchkanyas. Then she took control of her sari. She clenched it and she took control of it that I'm going to save myself. Same thing happens with us as well. Then we take our own ashray, my money, my insurance policy, my own strength, my own intellect is going to help me. So then she took control. That also did not work because Dushasan, being Dushasan, he had a lot of power, right? And supposedly, even if it had worked, then the sari would not have cooperated, right? There's only so much shearing a cloth can take. It would have split into two. And then when that also did not work, then she said, Dwarka Vasin, hey Govind. And she called out Krishna's, Govind's name because she surrendered and immediately Ambar Avatar happened. Okay. Now, if she had surrendered to begin with, same thing would have happened. But she took her time until she had exhausted all of her options. But the moment she surrendered, immediately that avatar took place. Okay, so that is what the surrender was, when it is like, I am only dependent upon you. That's a pretty advanced stage to get into. But nevertheless, let's look at what this surrender means. 18.62, which we are going to bring in our next session, talks about this concept. It says there are 6 principles of surrender. Each one of it, we will go in great detail. But let me introduce all 6 and have a brief discussion around these concepts today. So the first concept is to desire only in accordance with the desire of God. Pretty interesting. How do we know what is the desire of God? We are not sitting in God's head to know what is the desire of God, right? That's the first question that comes to mind. But take it on a face value, we'll discuss it. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is just to reiterate the first one, not to desire against the desire of God. Okay, these are the first. Now, if you think about it, the first two itself take away all the reasons for us to complain about anything ever in life again. It's like having acceptance and prasada buddhi. There are only 3 plans. One plan that you make for yourself. I want to do this, I want to do that, I need this, I need that. One plan that your parents make for you. You should get married, you should do this now, you should become a doctor, you should become this. Third plan is what God has for you, which supersedes all the plans. When do we complain? When we think our plan is superior to anybody, God's plan for us. That's when we complain. So if we simply align to these 2 principles, all the complaints should go away, thrown out of the window. Anytime we complain, we violate this principle. Okay, so it is more about acceptance or a prasad buddhi. Prasad buddhi means when we go to temple, we don't ask Pandit ji, okay, I need that prasad and not this and that, right? Whatever comes your way, you take it as a prasad. So prasada buddhi means accept everything as a offering from God for you, because he knows what is best for you. Right? There is a saying in Hindi which say, "Meri chahi na karo, main moorakh agyan, teri chahi mein hai prabhu mera kalyan." That means don't do what I desire or wish, God. Do as you wish, because you are my well-wisher. Okay. It did not rhyme well like it did in Hindi, but I hope you got the gist. So these are the first two principles. The third one is to have firm faith that God is protecting us. It's a big one too. When we become worried, anxious, some medical report comes and we become anxious. Somebody says something, we will become anxious. There's a deadline looming or an exam coming, we become anxious. We got to be really, of course, that does not absolve us from our efforts, but have that firm faith that God is protecting us. It's like a child asking a father, "Father, will I get my next meal?" Father will say, "Of course, I've taken care of it," right? Now, keeping aside the karmic law and stuff like that, pretty much everybody on this earth, any living species, their food is taken care of. Do waqt ki roti, like they say. Now, if somebody's a beggar or something else is happening, okay, there might be an algorithm at work, but typically, unless you have decided not to do anything, your food is typically taken care of by God, for all the species for that matter, right? Even Bible says that the birds, they neither plow nor sow seeds, but they are also taken care by God. The fourth one is to maintain an attitude of gratitude towards God. That is something which I think if we do mindfully, that is a great attitude to have for so many graces that we have received. If you think about it, right from the fact that we have an able body, we can see, hear, walk, have, do so many things. Even the air that we get, the water that we get, the earth that we get to roam upon, the family, relatives, support system, so many things. You can just count your number of graces, but having that attitude of gratitude towards God for so many things that happened in our day-to-day life as well, not just limited to what we already have. We'll talk about it in great detail, but I'm just, scratching the surface today for each one of these. It requires a very deep discussion on each one of these points. To see everything as we possess as belonging to God, this is very important. Where we fall trap to is having a sense of proprietorship, my this, my that. My son, my daughter, my spouse, my parents, my bank account. You really think it's mine? Anything can be snatched away in a jiffy, in a second. So we forget that we are the caretakers, trustees more than the owners. That owner mindset brings in a lot of stress and worry as well. And that's when we do that, then again, we are breaking that principle of surrender. And the last but not the least is to give up the pride of having surrendered. Now, if you say, "You know what, I'm so surrendered," you have already violated that principle. So give up the pride of having surrendered as well. So these are the 6 principles that we will spend our next few sessions talking about each one of these in great detail until it sinks in. But for today, I wanted to introduce it and then tie it all back to the concept of grace and everything. Any questions so far? Yes, Sipsita ji, you have already raised your hand.
In the meantime, Lakshmi is asking, how can we know that we are against the desire of God?
Good question. How do you even know how you are desiring, in accordance with the desire of God? That itself is asking, right? Let me try to explain it as best as I can through some analogy, but let's hear from Ipsita ji and then I'll come back to that question. Yes, Ipsita ji, you had a question.
Radhe Radhe. And so one thing I want to ask that when we surrender to God, is it at this moment only God takes care of us? Or once we are God realized, then he takes care of us?
No, God is actually waiting. He's doing a polling. Polling, we know, right? In IT also, they say they keep on polling a queue to see if a new message has come or not. He keeps polling because he's seated within us. He keeps checking the state of our surrender. And the moment we surrender, job is done. This surrender is pretty profound. Okay, he knows when to tick the box to say now this soul is firmly surrendered. And it is a way of life. It is going to be a journey. It's not a moment of surrender. It is like you are surrendered completely to God, and and God only would know That tick, he's completely surrendered now. And the moment even if it happens a minute before you die, the job is done. Now, but to reach that stage, you should have practiced it throughout your life, right? As a way of life. And then maybe you are pretty high in your surrender, things you accept, things you let go, never having a sense of proprietorship over anything around it, no pride whatsoever, no complaints, having gratitude for little things that you have. So if you've spent your entire life, then there's a possibility we could perfect our surrender towards it. But it's not going to happen like a flip of a switch, because we don't even understand what a true surrender means, right? Subconsciously, we are complaining about things, we are worrying about something, building anxiety. So these lines, if you think about it, it's a pretty deep concept. We have to make it as a way of our life and keep on increasing our Sharanagati or surrender. But to your point, the moment you surrender, God will grace you and your God realization will be complete. He says the moment you surrender, there won't be even a fraction's delay that he's going to burn your karmic backlog. And the moment your karmic backlog is burnt, anyway, you have become God realized at that moment. There's not even a fraction delay after that.
So in the process of surrendering, say I accept the things, I'm taking everything as God grace, I'm not thinking about my future, everything, all anxieties are gone. Okay. So accordingly, I progress. So accordingly, is he taking care of me?
Okay, so you're saying if we do 70% surrender, will we get 70% grace? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Based on your Sharanagati, he's definitely continuing to grace you. The final grace, the ultimate grace, which leads to God realization, will only come when you are 100% surrendered. But yes,
Yeah, that I know. But accordingly, when I'm moving towards surrendering, say it's happening every day with experience, right? So
you will continue to
so
get grace. Yeah, you will continue to get grace, draw God's grace around it.
like as Guruji said, that Krishna is saying, just close your eyes and run in bhakti. I have taken your yogsham. Huh? So if a pole comes in between, so I will remove it. You run in bhakti by closing your eyes. Okay.
Very true.
So that will happen when we are going towards Saranagati. So
Very true.
at that moment, he is taking it. He is protecting us. That yes, you do it. I will take care of other things. Is it like that way?
Very true. So along the journey also, you keep on getting grace. However, final grace will only be received, which leads to God realization, when you are 100% surrender. So let's say you are 70% surrendered. I don't know how God will calculate that. Will you see 70% of God? His head is not visible and part of it is visible. No, God is a perfectionist. That aspect will only come when you are 100. Even when you are 99.9% surrender, it will not happen. But does that mean zero grace or one grace? No. It's a journey. God also understands you will keep on getting grace, so that you keep on pushing your, raising.
Yes, that I want.
But the final grace, until we have reached that final grace,
Yeah, that I know. Yeah.
journey is not complete. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that they say, right, you need this much grace, you surrender this much, you need this much, surrender this much, this much, this much. But when you 100%, that's when sarva papebhyo, that statement that Lord Krishna has given, he's a perfectionist. That happens only when you complete 100% surrender. Now, if you're 70% surrender, is he saying he's going to burn off 70% of your karmic backlog? No, that is going to be zero in one thing. Okay, that's not going to happen. You will receive graces along the way. See, even in your life, you can experience that when you have bitterness towards somebody, or let's say they are stuck at some point. The moment you let go, you'll see that lesson would change as well. Immediately, that situation will ease out. So those are also graces from God only, right? As soon as you learn the lesson, as soon as you have acceptance around it, the situation itself will ease out. Those are also God's graces. But yeah, when you watchfully, mindfully do that, you'll understand that that is happening around you as well. Great question, though. Thank you so much, Ipshita ji.
Yes. On a lighter note, how do you measure this percentage? कि मेरे पास I have
there's a product available on Amazon. Okay, if you
Please
already,
yeah.
you wear
Thank
that, it will tell you, your surrender is 50%, 60%. Surrender.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Have that business model thinking about an idea, but I wish we had something. Only God and Guru would know what is our proportion of surrender as such. It's very difficult to know. We cannot know that, but we can get an idea about it. How frequently do we get worried? How
True.
much do we stay in present or dwell too much in future
Right.
or past? How much do we have a sense of attachment or belonging? This is mine, this is mine. People get upset even if their small thing is stolen.
Gee.
So all those things are a good yardstick for us to do a self-evaluation, because these principles are pretty deep if you think about it, very, very deep.
I believe we all know where we stand, I guess. We all know where we stand, that grace, that surrender.
Yeah.
And we have few questions in the mic. Shall I take them before the hands,
We
or
can
shall
take
I?
3 hands, and then we can take those 3 hands and questions, and then I know we have a hard stop as well today, right?
Tarunji is saying, working against God's wishes, working against dharma, not following dharma. And Smitaji says, why do we need to surrender? He is almighty, but why does he need us to surrender? And can't God make us surrender by his powers?
Can't he make? That's not
Us
the point. If, let's say, your kid, who's you are more powerful than your kid, right? Let's say 2-year-old or 3-year-old, and then through your power you could force that kid to say that I love you or I want to be with you. Will that give you a sense of satisfaction? No, right? So God also does the same. He has given us the free will. If he were to do with power, what's the point of creation? He might program it us like robots, right? And put that chip and say, we love you, God. That defeats the purpose. Then we don't have an incentive to become better if we are programmed. He wants us to become better. He wants us to genuinely become good so that we could be like him as well. And that is because of his mercy and causeless grace. Now, why do we need to surrender? It's a good question. Now, we are playing a perfect game of justice game with God, law of karma. If we have to move it towards mercy or a grace-based system, there also he follows a law. He follows a law of karma, right? That's a perfect law. Or what shall you sow, so shall you reap. But if you have to get out of that law, then also there is a law, and that law is of surrender. Okay, when you completely surrender, I'm willing to give grace you. If you don't surrender, keep continuing to bear the burden of your karmas. In that case, it's a perfect justice. You do good karma, I'll give you good. You do bad, you'll do bad, right? But we say no, we don't want to do anything, and we still want your grace. That is taking that argument a little too far. In fact, there is an argument between a soul and God, where God's soul says, you grace me and then I'll break all the records of surrender. God says, you surrender and then I'll grace you. He said, no, you grace me, then I'll surrender. Now, then that argument, you have to first surrender and then only you'll get the grace. Okay, this is how that goes. We'll talk in more details. Maybe it's a quick discussion. There might be some open questions in your mind, but we'll continue on this topic in the coming session. So please stay tuned. I've just scratched the surface on this today. Okay, let's hear from Pratyusha, and then we'll come to you, Sandhya and Aparnaji.
Hello everyone. Hello sir. So my question is, you said the surrender is a state, not an act. And the second thing that you said was surrender, it is done from a position of power. So when you explained the example of Draupadi, she reached that state where she surrendered. So it's not an act, it's a state. So I'm interested in what kind of power, because she used her own strength. It was not working. She depended on her husband and everyone else. So what kind of power she, put forward?
She reached a situation where she did not have a choice at all, right? But she was not forced by God to surrender to me. She still had that conviction, right? She could have resorted again back to her husband's or to her own strength or things like that. But she had that conviction somewhere in her mind that, God is the last resort and I'm going to tap into that. How many of us would have that as well, right? In that situation, we would still be screaming, shouting for help from people around us. So when I said power, that means when you have a choice, that's when you exert your free will, right? For example, let's say you have an opportunity to give money to somebody, but you say, no, I'm going to give it once when I die. Then you don't have a choice. Then anyway, you have to leave it aside, right? Again, a story, a guy was thinking how much I should give to God and how much I should keep for myself during his morning prayers. So he was deliberating upon it until the wind came and blew the entire food away. And he said, okay, 100% to you, God. Is that truly a sacrifice or a surrender? No, it is not, right? So from that standpoint, I was saying, but yes, to your point, Draupadi didn't have a choice at that point. But good thing was she could still think of God and she was able to, call out and surrender at that point. What was the second question?
Same thing. So the position of power. So I was like wondering, was it some devotion that she was, using?
She was one of the Panchkanyas. Actually, Draupadi, Ahilya, Tara, and I think a couple of other ladies are there as well. They are called Panchkanya. So she is not an ordinary lady. Okay, she was a late maiden. Okay, although she had 5 husbands, but she's called as a maiden. So she was spiritually very advanced, and she considered Lord Krishna as her Sakha friend. So she had a pretty deep conviction and understanding of who Lord Krishna is. One of the few people who understood his divinity. But yeah, even if we are able to call God in distress and able to perfect our surrender, that is acceptable. But the thing is that conviction needs to be there.
One more thing was in Bhagavad Gita, I think in chapter 7, the Bhagwan says that surrender on surrender. He says 4 type of people surrender to me. So which is distressed, curiosity, and seekers of knowledge and seekers of material possessions. So in all of that, we have to become, I'm surrendered to you. You can give whatever.
He says, he doesn't say 4 people surrender to me. He says 4 type of people approach me. Chaturvidha bhajante mam, yo jana paryupasite, jigyasu, arto, arti, and gyani. Jigyasu, one who's curious, who wants to know more about this topic. Arto means one who is in distress, material distress. I need this. Some kind of a tragedy has happened in material life. Arthi, one who's seeking something in life, right? People say, God, I will give you prasad if you get this done. And Gyani means who's a genuine seeker. That means in his past life, he might probably would have started seeking. So these 4 kind of people approach him. He's not saying 4 surrender to him. But yes, everybody needs to surrender actually, because finally Bhagavad Gita says that Sarv Dharmam Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braj, right? And then God goes on to say that Aham Tvam Sarve Papebhyo Mokshasi Mashucha. He said, do not fear. I'm going to burn off everything for you. So surrender is a pretty advanced concept. We are work in progress towards surrender, but we should look out or seek out opportunities where we can increase our surrender, and life will continue to throw such opportunities in plenty every day. You see, every day some or other opportunity will come where we are not able to let go of something. We are violating the principle of surrender. It's very simple. We are not able to let go of something. We are complaining. We are saying playing a victim card in life, or we are overly attached to our relatives or people or family. All those are actually violating the principle of surrender.
It's never a kind of percentage. It is based on situation, and the percentage will always vary until it becomes 100% for everything.
God is always constantly checking, surrender. Where are they with the surrender? Yes, very true. Okay, Nitin. Okay, Sandhya, and then we'll come to you. Nitin ji, go ahead, Sandhya. We have 7 minutes, so we can do it really quick. 6 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, short time. Mandodri was an addition in the Panchkanya from Samji. I was also saying that Amazon product that you were talking about can also be called as grace-o-meter. And last thing, just one quote from Swamiji. Work as if the outcome depends upon you, but when you receive the results, accept it as a fate. And this statement really reiterates the first 2 points, aligning the will with God's will. So that's it.
Right. Work as if everything depends on you, result as if everything depends on God. So acceptance basically afterwards. Thank you. By the way, we have another session getting started from December 7th, which is going to be led by none other than Sandhya and Shefali, and Rahul and Arun, and who else?
Hasmita, our youth lead.
Youth lead. They're going to start another session, so look out for that. check it out. You may want to block your 8:30 on Fridays going forward, starting December 7th. So it's going to be exciting. We'll stay tuned for more information around it. But Sandhya, you can start publishing it and start promoting your session. And we are all excited and looking forward to it and wishing you the very best. Let's move on to Aparnaji now and then Nitinji real quick.
Radhe Radhe. My question was, is 100% faith the same as complete surrender? We don't have faith, that's why we have worries. If we surrender, we don't worry about anything, right?
Probably
Is that correct?
in a way. If you look at it, knowledge leads to faith. Faith leads to love, and love automatically to surrender. So yeah, I think faith would be 100% as well. Then only you can surrender in that sense. So knowledge leads to faith, faith leads to love, and love leads to surrender. When we love somebody, we are automatically surrendered. So yeah, I think faith will be 100% as well at that point. Yeah, you cannot have 99% faith and 100% surrender. Both are, I think, interrelated in that sense. Yeah. Yes, Nitinji, Nitin talking to Nitin. Okay, very rarely does it happen, but yeah, privilege. Yes, please go ahead. We have
That was only my purpose that, Namaskar, sir, that I could talk to you. First of all, thank you for a beautiful lecture, because from 4.37 you took us to 12.62. And sir, I just want to say, because you have only taught us in one of the lectures, Ahankar Tattva Ahamakar. I think Ahankar breaks, then only we become surrenders. Because you have given us the point, they've written all the down. And really, it was a wonderful lecture. I wanted to say you thank you that it was my luck that I could attend the class today. And I still remember the example of Sudama, that when he surrendered himself and he has given his dana, that a small rice, what he got to the Krishna, then Krishna gave him everything. So I think that is what is the level of surrender. I think we all are on the path, and you are so luckiest and thankful that I could get something, from this lecture, and thankful to you.
Not it all thanks should get directed to Maharajji and Swamiji. I'm just a facilitator, but I'm glad you could make it today, and it's always a privilege talking to you. And the example that you gave is spot on. When Sudama gave all that he had, see, it's like a deal we are striking with God. God says, you give me what you have, which is a piece of our mind, nothing else. By the way, we don't have anything other than this little bit of buddhi worth 2 inches. God says, give it to me and I'll give you all that I have. Now, if a beggar and a billionaire strike a deal where billionaire says, you give me what you have and I give you what all I have, who's the biggest gainer, right? Beggar is. So that's the same kind of transaction God is asking here, right? Which we find very difficult to do. So
when you spoke about Draupadi also, she looked at everybody and then she realized who the real Tattva is. वो कभी हम सोचते नहीं है that we always feel हम कर रहे हैं. So it is always operated by him. और जो आपने 6 points बताए, 5 points, I mean, I think we have to revise. I think I have to revise. No, I means my body has to revise it, and my mind has to revise it every day. That is the good thing. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
We all need to. In fact, I would say stick these 6 points of surrender on your refrigerator or on the wall, wherever you want, because they will come in very handy for daily reminders. Am I surrendering? Am I giving up the opportunity to surrender in this particular situation? If you keep it as a constant reminder, we'll get better at it. When we start complaining around the situation, that's the first pitfall that we all suffer, right? So no complaints, nothing, just be chilled out about it. Okay, so with that said, we have Tulsi Viva coming up. A quick announcement I wanted to make. So please do join the festivities starting this Friday. We will have Mehendi and all those ceremonies that will happen. So it's going to be in grand RKT style like we always do. So do check it out. Other than that, I think we'll continue on this fascinating topic of discussion from tomorrow. And like I said, look out for the session that is going to start coming Friday. That is going to change your life forever. Okay, for the youth and adults alike. I think I've marketed your session already too much. We'll keep on reminding you that. And then last but not the least, if you want to talk about Gita Jayanti, how Gita has benefited you, please write it in the feedback tracker. We will start that series pretty soon, leading all the way up to Gita Jayanti. With that said, now you can stay back for the next session. Radhe Radhe, good night, good day from my side. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Sunil bhai, over to you. Radhe Radhe.